election headquarters. This is Texoma Politics Now.
Good morning and thanks for joining us. I'm Nicholas Kwalik. Well, in the month of February, the southern border took center stage, sparking debates, dueling political rallies, and a national emergency. On Friday, House Democrats introduced a resolution attempting to block President Trump's declaration to spend money at the border wall without congressional approval. Mark Meredith explains how the resolution is unlikely to gain enough support to override an expected presidential veto.
House Democrats have introduced a bill to block President Trump's emergency order for a border wall.
Well, there is no emergency at the border. It's a mythology of the president, not a reality at the border.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the House will vote on and likely pass the measure Tuesday. All eyes will then shift to the Senate, where Democrats are hoping frustrated Republicans will support the effort. Democrats argue the emergency declaration is an attempt to circumvent congressional authority. But even if the bill passes the Senate,
will I veto it? 100%.
And it's unlikely Congress would be able to override that veto. Meanwhile, outside the White House Friday, it was a rodeo of sorts.
It's been a great trip.
These self-described cowboys from New Mexico say they traveled to Washington to make a point.
To support our president and some of the decisions he's making on the wall.
But several states, including New Mexico, are suing to block the emergency declaration. And the president says he believes the case will ultimately end up in the Supreme Court. But it's not clear when the Supreme Court would take this case, meaning this is an issue that's not likely to disappear anytime soon and is also likely to play a big role in the 2020 election. For Texoma Politics Now, I'm Mark Meredith in Washington.
And joining us now is MSU political science professor Dr. Steve Garrison. Always glad to have you with us, Dr. Garrison.
Great to be here, Nick.
Yeah. So your take on the president's national emergency declaration?
Well, this is a pretty serious challenge to congressional power and the role of Congress in our constitutional system. The ability to call a national emergency is based on originally a constitutional power, but more recently a 1976 law that was designed to put limitations on presidents so that they don't do this willy-nilly and expand powers. One of the things that we know historically, the executive branch, when it takes on new powers, it's kind of like opening a letting the genie out of the bottle. You don't really put those powers back in. So it's a big challenge for the role of Congress in the future.
If it makes it through the courts and does actually help a border structure get built, what sort of precedent does it set?
Well, obviously one issue with the border sort of an aside thing, for at least people like myself that study politics and stuff, it's a big issue because it sets a precedent for a president, once Congress has made a decision not to allocate money for a specific project, to then go out and declare this national emergency and then spend money how they would like to. And if we really go down that road, it's a further erosion of congressional power, and it sets a precedent for a president to do this anytime they're not getting the support from their congressional members, and that can be a very dangerous thing.
Speaking of support, you see these videos online now from not too long ago of former presidents and current sitting senators saying immigration needs fixing, but when it comes time, when the rubber meets the road, they're seeming to want to back off. Why is that?
Well, there's a couple of things, and if we put it in a bigger scheme of things, it's also tied to the budgetary process. And really, since the 1970s, we ran these massive budget deficits and unable to, balance the budget each year. And so each year we get further into that hole. It's harder and harder to compromise because the pie becomes of what can actually be renegotiated becomes smaller and smaller. Also, immigration is an extremely difficult policy to address, and additionally things like abortion. People tend to have very definitive views one way or another, and it's easy to say there's a problem, we need to fix it, but when it requires both sides to compromise in some element to get the best policy for the nation, it's hard to do.
Right. And finally, there's a lot politically happening this week. Of course, we have Michael Cohen's testimony coming up. Many are speculating we may see the result of the Mueller probe, the Mueller investigation. We'll also see a second meeting between President Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Will anything of substance come out of it, do you think?
Well, the talks, at least with North Korea, are advancing, and hopefully that'll continue this process of trying to figure out some type of a working relationship between the two countries. I think the Michael Cohen testimony and then the ongoing Southern District of New York criminal investigations have we'll see where those go. I think there's a lot of potential. What we've seen in the public news, if a portion of that's true, it's going to be a very difficult challenge to the U.S. Constitution. So yeah, and then the Mueller report. It would be nice to finally know what we found out was going on, and then be able to address it.
So you think this second summit is more than just shaking hands and say, hey, how are you? Good to see you
well,
again.
there's always that opportunity, but we have to wait and see what actually transpires, because I think we all know at this point it's very unlikely for North Korea to give up their weaponry once they have it.
Only time will tell.
Yes.
Dr. Steve Garrison, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick.
And by the way, we want to remind you that NBC News will broadcast around-the-clock coverage of the U.S. and North Korea summit. Lester Holt will lead coverage beginning Tuesday from Hanoi with a special edition of NBC Nightly News. Down in Austin, Texas Democrats lay out their plans for school finance, including all-day pre-K, teacher races, and property tax relief. How it compares to a Republican proposal when we come back.